Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing Akhenaten in the 5-minute pool on ICC. Let's give International Akhenaten a Scandi, and he's playing Knight f3. Okay, yeah, we don't face this line too often, but it's certainly a viable line. I'm going to avoid playing on the queen side with like Knight c6 and castles long. I'm going to choose a line where black typically castles short, and we'll see how this goes. All right, h3, let's just back this up. And usually they end up playing c4 and trying to establish a pawn duo out there. I think white has chances to be slightly better in this line, but it's not something I haven't dealt with before, let's say, so I think it's fine. Usually they play like queen b3, knight c3, rook fd1, rook ac1, that sort of thing. Okay, let's take e2. And then we'll take here and play knight d7. They can play rook d1. We'll just sidestep that with queen c8. Knight takes e5 as a threat. I had a game against a GM that reached almost exactly the same position. Okay, queen g4, interesting. So trying to create some problems for me castling-wise. I did not anticipate that move, but I can see the value in it. So if I castle, bishop h6 is going to be the counter argument. So it looks like I have to play g6 and keep my king in the center for the time being. And I wonder if they're going to continue with bishop h6 to stop me from castling. Nope, he's not. Okay, so let's take this opportunity to castle short then. Maybe his argument will be that g6 has been a weakening move. But we have a compact position nonetheless, so we'll try to maneuver within this little situation. Now, I would really like to trade rooks down the file, but that's not going to be simple with like knight f8 being maybe met by knight f6 at all times. Maybe I just have to deal with that and allow that to happen, but nah, that can't be good. How do I free myself, though, if I can't do that? f5 is not desirable. I would hate to play f5. Though maybe I'll have to. Maybe there's not a good way to play it otherwise. I could play bishop f8 to g7, but bishop f8 I'm walking right into knight takes d or rook takes d7 ideas. Well, I really hate to do this, but I don't see a practical way to play the position without doing it, without breaking with f5. So we'll hope for the best here. You see, I take on a very weak e-pawn in doing this, is the problem. Okay, so now knight h5 perhaps. Still not great. Bishop d6 maybe. Bishop d6, queen f3 though. Bishop d6, queen f3, rook f8, something like that. Okay, let's... there's also queen h4. I have to keep in mind. All right, let's go knight h5. Again, playing some moves I really wish I didn't have to play, but desperate times. Can I offer a pawn somehow? Bishop f6, take on... here at the end. That might work. Bishop f6, trade everything. All right, it's not pretty, but let's try it. You can just take
Check.
d8 first. He had rook takes d8 if he wanted. Okay, now
Check.
we're going down this path. He has rook b1, I suppose. Or that. Can I win c4? If I can win c4, maybe I have a chance at saving this. He could still play rook b1 if he wants. It would still be strong. It's going to go there. Okay. Well, bishop e5. Or knight f6. There's also knight f6. No, I think bishop e5 should be stronger. And then I can play rook takes c4 next. Although I'm not threatening mate on c1 or anything, so... Got to recover this pawn at least. g4, okay. Knight f4 or something else. Knight f6, knight g7. Let's play knight here. He can trade and then take on b7, and I'll play a5. I'm down a pawn in that ending, though. And I absolutely have to save the a-pawn, because if I don't, I will for sure lose. Knight g5, threatening mate. We should address that. Maybe bishop f6. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to take and then try to play like rook over, something like this. If check, king f7, tactically I look okay. If I can get my knight to e6, it'll be relatively stable there. Unless he's going to play like rook e7. I do have knight f4, though. I feel like I'm getting more chances than I deserve right now. Based on how that went down, starting with f5 on move 17. We'll see if I can scrap and claw my way out of this yet. Brings that back. Let's go g5. I don't want him going g5. Okay, let's attack that bishop. I don't want it getting too comfortable on e5. It's pretty strong there. Okay. Let's bring our king up a bit. At least his bishop is out of play for now. Let's go here, attack this pawn. Let's bring this up. So if he wants to go after my h-pawn, he's got to give me the a-pawn at least. It's one rule I have set for him. Okay, let's go here. He's playing to dominate my rook a little bit. Let's see if he wants how bad he wants that h-pawn.
Check.
Ooh. Hello, rook g2 checkmate. Wow. Suddenly I'm winning, I think. Unless he has some stalemate trick.
Check.
Oh, he's going to give this up. Wow. Yeah, we are winning now. All right, well, you know Finn's likes a good old swindle once in a while. That was pretty bad. But, yeah, he got ahead of himself. I had a mating net idea with knight f4 in mind, and I guess he can play bishop d6 here. Bishop d6, he still covers f4, and he threatens rook e7 in a lot of cases. It's getting a little dicier because I do have an a-pawn now, but it still feels like white's the one who's pressing. Well, pretty bad game on both our parts. Maybe I played this too simple. I'm not sure. Maybe I took on e5 too soon. Actually, this queen g4, queen g3 idea gave me some issues because the weakness of f6 was significant after knight e4. Possibly I panicked too early in playing f5, but I just didn't see a good way to free myself. Because if I play knight f8 here, then I'm inviting knight f6, whereupon I feel like I have to take it. And then when he takes with the e-pawn on f6, if you can visualize that position, at all times he's threatening to get his queen into g7 and checkmate me. And even though I have a knight on f8, and I can claim to be following that famous saying, knight on f8, there is no mate. In that case, I think I'm going to get mated on g7. So knight on f8, there could be a mate on g7. How about we modify the saying? So yeah, I mean, I have a feeling this is already pretty comfortable for white. But let's go back and have a look. So this is a Scandi with knight f3. I mentioned this before, but I believe knight f3 is a pretty underrated move against the Scandinavian. Most people just play knight c3 on autopilot. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other, but I think knight f3 has been unfairly ignored by most players. Most people are so eager to win a tempo that they don't really consider what their setup is going to look like 5 or 10 moves down the line. And the major advantage of knight f3 over knight c3 is that you do not block your c-pawn. And you can try to establish a pawn duo, pawns on d4, c4, which is something that in the knight c3 Scandinavians you usually don't get to achieve. So knight f3, I played bishop g4, bishop e2. Now, probably the most theoretically correct way to play this line is with knight c6. And you try to castle long. In doing so, you create a ton of pressure on d4. But there's a lot of sharp theory in this line. Sometimes I go for that, but occasionally I like a little quieter game, so I played knight f6 in this case. I think all this is normal. You can make a case for queen d6 here. I just played queen d8 all the way back. So yes, white has a pawn duo, but black does have a solid structure with the bishop outside the pawn chain, so I don't think black should be that much worse. Let's start the engine right about here. So the engine actually wants to take on e5 right away. I thought about that for a second, but then I dismissed it because I thought maybe they could play bishop takes h5, but yeah, this could be an answer.
Check.
King a4 check. King f8. Queen takes c4, and then take on h5. I think the computer likes king f8 because if, like, pawn c6, there's bishop takes f7.
Check.
And white will get rid of the bishop, but then regain their piece by taking on c4. So, yeah, that was a line I should have considered. Knight takes e5 immediately, because the difference there would be that after d takes e5, I could take on d1, and I could just get the queens off directly. That would be nice. Does that work out? Take. What if they take here? Bishop takes, and I'm going to win b2. Okay, rook takes d1, bishop takes b2, knight d2, take. And here, black has rook plus 2 pawns against the 2 minor pieces. An interesting situation. Probably black is not worse, though. Usually rook and 2 pawns is enough against 2 minor pieces. So instead I took on e2 and then took on e5. But yeah, I get the sense that I played this too simplistically. Maybe even here, queen c8 is not necessarily best. Maybe I should castle straight away. Yeah, because I had trouble castling in the game and had a weak king side as a result. So maybe I should do this right away. So queen c8, and good move by white, queen g4. Attacking the g7 pawn and trying to create a weakness. So g6. Note that if castles, I run into bishop h6, setting up a mate threat on g7. Yeah, and if g6, he wins the exchange. So, and if knight takes e5, then queen takes g7, forks these 2 pieces. So I played g6, and then he put the queen on g3. I castled, knight c3. Yeah, it looks like this position is just bad for black. Already +1 for white. It doesn't look like I've done anything horribly wrong, but when you're playing a line like this where you're ceding the opponent a bunch of space, it's surprising. Like, sometimes a seemingly imperceptible mistake will result in a big disadvantage once you play out a few more moves. And that's what I'm experiencing right here. White has a real simple plan of sticking the knight on e4 and then exploiting the dark square weaknesses. And there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So, in retrospect, I really wish I would have played on move 10, knight takes e5, instead of bishop takes e2. That was just an autopilot decision on my part. Yeah, because white has clearly won the opening battle at this point. And I thought if I tried to move my knight and trade rooks, then I was just going to get killed on the dark squares. I mean, even with just knight f6 right away, but I also see the computer likes this move. Trying to trade the bishops and then get into f6. Yeah, that makes sense as well. So I lashed out with f5, but maybe I didn't have much of a choice. It kind of felt that way. I didn't see another good way to coordinate. Maybe b6, queen b7, but it's just too easy. I'm giving white everything he wants on the king side, and I think it's too simple for him to play. Like, even something like bishop g5 now. And if we trade, now I have to watch out for queen h6 and knight g5. It seems like my position is just going to get worse and worse. Also, with the dark square bishop no longer guarding f6, I always got to watch rook takes d7 and knight f6 check. Yeah, it's losing. And after this, I've got this clearly weak pawn on e6 and a much worse position. Much weaker king, too. And I think the only thing that allowed me to save this game was some luck at the end. That's about it. And his inattentiveness. Bishop f6, also not the greatest move. When I played bishop f6, it only occurred to me after that he could actually play rook takes d8 here. And if I take with the queen, I'm no longer guarding e6.
Check.
And I'm just getting checkmated here, apparently. Yeah, if king h8, at the very least, there's knight f7 check. And if here, there's check followed by taking on h7 with mate. So it appears on rook takes d8, I would have had to take with the bishop, which is not a part of my plan in playing bishop f6 on the previous move.
Check.
So I guess I should prefer bishop d6 instead, but I'm still losing e6. That's similarly bad.
Check. Check.
Yeah. And even here, I thought there were some better ways that white maybe could have played it. Maybe rook b1, attacking the bishop and then going after b7, because I feel like c7 will always be weak, but maybe he should go win b7 first. That would have the effect of splitting up these two remaining pawns, and he still maintains his 3 pawns versus 2 pawns advantage on the king side. So I think that was a good option for him too. As played, I had a glimmer of hope. The game just kept going on, and I somehow got chances. Yeah, I thought about knight f6 here, but I didn't see much after, I think even just rook b2 I thought was acceptable for him. Bishop c1, okay. Yeah, not something I saw. Knight d5 is best. Idea being if take here, there's knight e7 and go pick up the rook, and white keeps that pawn advantage. So I did this. I was a little surprised he just didn't go after b7, but I think he wanted to end it a little bit earlier, and with knight g5, he's setting up rook d8. And I'd have to sacrifice my knight to avoid mate. Here he took b7, yep. Okay, so at least once we get to this point, I know I'm not in danger of, like, imminent checkmate. So I'm still down a pawn, but there is hope, as I was saying. So here, bishop h6 is stronger. And if knight e6, rook e7. Okay, trying to drive away my knight from helping my king. Yeah, that does look pretty convincing. I mean, rook a6 would be a terrible move to have to play. I'm totally passive now. But I suppose if I instead move my knight somewhere... Whoops. Rook e7, let's say, I don't know, knight c5.
Check.
He's giving a check. If I go to the corner, something like rook c7 is just going to win, threatening this and this. Yeah, so this is losing as well. Here I played g5. I just didn't want him to cement his bishop in on f6 with g5 himself. Maybe I shouldn't be that worried about that, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try to gain some space back on the king side. I'm not winning the a2 pawn anytime soon, so I'll just leave my rook on a4, where it's attacking a2 and guarding a7, and try to make it hard for him to utilize his extra pawn on the king side. I think I did a reasonable job of resisting, but that said, I mean, even up till the end, it looked like white was pressing. Here I should play knight f4. I don't know. I'd be hesitant to offer a transition into a rook endgame like that.
Check.
If knight f4 takes, take with the g-pawn? Huh. Sometimes you can't completely trust the engine when endgames are concerned. So I'm not sure it understands the consequences of transitioning into this pawn down endgame. And certainly with the amount of time and the board situation, I probably want to keep my knight on board. In my opinion, that gives me more counter chances than just trading it at the earliest opportunity.
Check.
Okay, so he's still doing fine, but yeah, I mean here, probably king f1 would have been safer, since king g3 does invite knight f4 in the future with the rook g2 threat. Yeah, and here he just blundered. Yeah, bishop f6 blunders the game away. So this would maintain white's advantage. Is white still winning? I don't know. I mean, plus 1.3, it's hard to say. At least now I can't play rook d2 because he has rook check and pick up the knight. So I'd probably have to do something like, I don't know, king d8. But then he can take here, king d7. He's always got to be careful of knight f4, but once he eliminates my h-pawn, it's starting to look winning, so long as he's mindful of my one checkmating opportunity. And by the way, this is a mating pattern that you should know. A major piece and a knight coordinating like that and setting up a checkmate. Flight square on h4 taken away by the pawn.
Check.
Yeah, so he gave the piece, but not much else to do here for white. All right, so very lucky escape. I got to modify how I play this line a bit. I'll have to remember that if an early knight e5 is played, look for knight takes e5 and not necessarily bishop takes e2 automatically, the more natural move. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. Talk to you guys later.